The people behind Daredevil have said they see this series as one long 13-hour movie. And I'd like to point out that the second acts of movies are hard to do. And the second act does indeed seem to be tripping up this creative team. Now that's not to say I didn't enjoy episodes 6 and 7. I did, and if you stay tuned in this review, I'm about to pay this series my biggest compliment yet. However, I do feel that episodes 6 and 7 are the weakest yet, for a couple of reasons. Now, the first reason is that you can see the wheels turning a little bit too much, and by that, I mean you can see the to-do list of the writers. For instance, in the second act, you often have to move important pieces on the board into position for big things that you have planned to happen, especially as you set up the big, event of your movie, right at the end of the second act, right before you head into the third act. So you can see the pieces being moved on the board, and they have to be moved. That's the purpose of the second act. However, a really good second act can move those pieces without you knowing they're being moved, and also while continuing to deliver really taut writing that keeps the tensions high and has a rich story. But I didn't think that was the case, and perhaps that's because this is a 13-hour movie. It's hard when you have such a long running time to keep things at a certain height and tension and momentum. There's bound to be some slack, and this is where it is. So that's the one problem, seeing the mechanics and the needs of the script. Now the other problem is that for the first time, Matt Murdock, the very charismatic Charlie Cox, is not really leading the charge. He takes a step back, while in both of these episodes he's taught some lessons. And they're important lessons, but I think Charlie Cox's Daredevil becomes so pulled back and so on the sidelines that it makes it clear that he's a big driving force with this show. Now, I've said before that Charlie Cox often will a bad scene to be good, but I think that I'm surprised that just his presence is necessary to really keep this thing charging forward. Now, in the first episode, of course, his teachers are Vladimir. We'll talk specific characters at the end of the review, as usual, with chapter times noted in the video description. But just quickly here, I want to point out that his teachers are Vladimir and Wilson Fisk in the first episode 6 that I'm reviewing today. And then in 7, of course, it's Stick. And it's funny to see him have two devils on his shoulders, right? Usually you have a devil and an angel, but this Daredevil is surrounded by evil, as they're both, all of his teachers are very quick to point out. And I thought that was good. And again, second act, necessary character development, but a little too obvious, and the people that are brought to the front instead of Charlie Cox, not quite as charismatic. Even though I know some of you will be like, well, Wilson Fisk is amazing. What are you talking about? And I liked Vladimir quite a bit, but they don't have the fire of the man who sees the world on fire. All right, so that's the other reason that I think this didn't quite work for me. Now, the third doesn't have anything to do with the show, but the fact that it airs on Netflix. And I have to say that when you watch Netflix shows on a computer, it's tough to focus because you have so many other distractions at your fingertips. I've watched all the other episodes, or most of them, on a television. But I've switched over because I'm trying to keep up with my reviews here while covering all the other news that's dropping. So I've been watching the episodes on a computer, and my Twitter will call to me. My email will call to me. I just need to check them, for work. Also, a Batman v Superman teaser trailer or actual leaked trailer will drop. So all those things pull you away from the show. So I'm going to try and either continue going back to watching it on TV or watching it full screen on my computer. And I'm curious if you guys are having the same problem. And I feel that Netflix has two problems with their shows, because they're doing amazing creative work. But in the delivery system, I still feel that dropping it all at once I know that delights people who like to binge watch, but I think it makes all the episodes run together. People are watching it on different schedules, so it's hard to have a shared experience. And then also, again, you get distracted by other things that are on your computer. And so I think that's a slight problem for Netflix, and I think they have to work a little harder to keep people's attention. While something that's delivered in more traditional mediums, like television or movies, can afford to have some slack and lose a little momentum, I don't think that Netflix can, because they have to compete not just with other forms of entertainment, but also other things on your computer like Twitter and email. Now, speaking of Batman v Superman, as I said, I've been saying in my coverage of the teaser and the leaked trailer, I think that Daredevil is really making a play for the Dark Knight mantle. And I think that that's really an aggressive move on Marvel's part against DC. And I think DC is probably aware of it. How could they not be, right? I mean, you have to check out what the competition is doing. And as soon as you watch Daredevil, you see huge parallels to Batman. Now, of course, they exist because Frank Miller worked on both properties. So again, as I've been saying, you can also lay some of this blame with Frank Miller. But now that we're fighting in the mainstream, medium for mainstream audiences, they're not familiar with the Frank Miller, tied, his shared history. So they're going to fight it out for who walks away with the mantle of the Dark Knight in terms of the eye of the mainstream moviegoer who isn't familiar, or just mainstream entertainment watcher who isn't familiar with the comic book history. So I strongly feel that Daredevil is so good and so encroaches on Batman's territory over at DC that I do think that there's a potential for Daredevil to be what elevates the Marvel versus DC Cold War to an actual war. And you're seeing the moves get more aggressive, for instance, with Warner Brothers deciding to release the Batman v Superman trailer not in front of Mad Max Fury Road, but in front of Avengers. Very aggressive move, and as I said before, I think it's because of this show. Now, also speaking of Batman, I think that there are certain things in this show where it shines. For instance, the shot in the stairwell in episode 7, when the Asian guy runs into this emergency stairwell and the camera follows him down, and then he runs into a very lavish apartment. That emergency stairwell shot, it called to mind early episodes, very early episodes, like the first few of Batman the Animated Series, where for the first time they brought film noir storytelling into animation. Now, of course, as we all know, here comes that compliment I told you about. Now, as we all know, Batman the Animated Series forever changed the way animated superhero shows were done. It changed the game. And I have a very strong feeling that Daredevil will forever change the game when it comes to live-action superhero TV shows. And I think that's very exciting. And I do believe that Daredevil is on par, Netflix's Daredevil is on par with Batman the Animated Series. And so that is a major accomplishment from Marvel and the creative team they've assembled here for their Netflix shows. Very exciting. Now, while I did pay a compliment to that cinematography and the stairwell, I feel this show continues to run hot and cold in terms of the quality of its visual storytelling. That shot was amazing, and I loved the shot where Daredevil and Vladimir fell through the multiple floors in that condemned building. And when they landed in the dirt that was on top of Daredevil, it just really sold it. I was super impressed. However, then you have other sequences like the parking garage where Daredevil confronts Leland Owsley, and then also the dock with the whole black sky thing, the docks, and that's incredibly uninspired visual storytelling. So it's so weird to see such strong choices made here and there, and then for them to just totally drop the ball and have subpar visuals that it continues to be a little frustrating. I'm like, I've seen what you're capable of. You should just put somebody on the job, like your cinematographer, obviously, but should just constantly be trying to plus your game, to up your visual game, because it's frustrating. Also, another area where I think this failed in terms of visuals quite significantly was in episode 7 when you had the fight between Stick and Matt Murdock in his apartment. Because how obvious was it every time they switched to a younger stunt double for Stick? I was like, I can tell that's a much younger guy in a gray wig. I mean, it's really obvious. I mean, you'd have to be... even Matt Murdock can tell with his blurry fire vision. He's like, Stick, that's not you. All right, so moving on. I have my notes here. Again, these episodes, they bleed together a lot. It's hard. Oh, yeah, the other thing I wanted to talk about before I'm getting that Netflix thing that I told you about where it just becomes like a cloud, and I'm getting into the Daredevil cloud territory. But anyway, before we go into the specific characters, the other thing that I didn't like, which I thought was a sign of some sloppy writing, was the whole Black Sky thing in episode 7. I didn't like it for a couple of reasons. First of all, Black Sky seemed to be introduced as this Omega-level threat that was kind of on par with something the Avengers and the MCU should be dealing with. So I didn't like seeing it brought into this area of whatever you would call the whole Marvel universe. So I don't know if this counts as part of the MCU. I think it does. So I guess the distinction is the Black Sky seemed like a movie-level threat, something the Avengers would be called in to deal with. So to see him on this Defenders level, so I guess you have the Avengers level and the Defenders level, I thought was disconcerting and didn't work. Because I think that the reason the Defenders has been so effective, or at least the Daredevil show, because it's first out of the gate, is that it has created its own niche, its own separate little pocket of the MCU, where it makes sense that you don't see the Avengers. So as soon as you bring this kind of element in, you're like, wait a minute, shouldn't you call the Avengers with this guy instead of you people taking care of it? It just doesn't make any sense. Also, my other problem is this just smacked of a writing device. It was clearly there just to be like, oh, we have to prove that Daredevil won't kill no matter what and Stick will. And Daredevil is ridiculously trusting. I was like, wow, Matt Murdock, talk about being an unexperienced idealist. You just proved Wilson Fisk right in every regard with how you dealt with Stick. So I thought that it was so obvious a plot device in terms of character development for not only Matt Murdock, but his relationship with Stick. But then also they built all this, they built up the whole episode to Black Sky. They were like, oh, this is a big deal. And then they kill him off camera, unless that was incorrect, off screen. So I didn't like that. I thought that was sloppy, and it was like, hey, don't write checks, literally, because this is the writing department, that you can't cash on the show. So that was frustrating, and I think it didn't fit, and I thought it was poorly handled. I'm not quite sure who the mysterious being or the mysterious person that Stick is talking to in the end. At first, when I saw the back, I was reminded of Iron Fist with his tattoo on his back, and so I thought, but actually it's on his chest, but that's what I was thinking about. So as I said before, I'm not as familiar with Daredevil lore as some of the other comic book properties, but they kind of piqued my interest with that, but it was so vague, and it was so, it was such a vague Easter egg, if it is an Easter egg, that I just it was a little bit frustrating to me. I was like, hey, other people besides diehard Daredevil fans are watching your show. I think that you should, be a little more inclusive. All right, so that's my overall thoughts on episodes 6 and 7. Let's go to character-specific discussion. And as always, there are chapter times noted in the video description if there's a character you just can't wait to talk about. So starting off with Matt Murdock, as I said, I missed him being the focus of these episodes. I thought that he was and I also thought it was out of character of how obtuse and naive he was. I didn't like that. But I thought he did a very good job with what he was given to do, and I really liked him bonding with Vladimir. I was like, hey, in another life, you guys could have been pals. So not too much for him to do there. Now, one of the things they really talked a lot about here, though, was a final confrontation with Wilson Fisk, and I hope they deliver that. They could hold off on it, but I do wonder what Matt Murdock's going to do, because I think some very good arguments are made for him doing what he's sworn not to do. I also do agree that his line is super blurry with him saying, I'll drop somebody off a roof and put them in a coma, where they could still die, but I won't actually kill them. I felt that, they're having a hard time. I think the writing team, again, this is where you can see the wheels turning, trying to make sure that he seems like a hero, but that he's dark enough to fit what they're trying to do with this show, with what they're trying to accomplish. Because I think the only reason he kept Vladimir alive was because he wanted information from him, right? Maybe because they bonded. Maybe that was on the roof that guy's problem. He should have tried to do some small talk with Daredevil, and then he couldn't drop you off the roof. But I just feel they need to nail down Daredevil's moral code, because it's getting a little bit too murky, and I'm becoming as frustrated with him as some of the bad guys are. All right, so next, Wilson Fisk. I haven't quite seen the genius of Wilson Fisk that many of you attest to. I'm sure it's coming, but I do like so far with the way the character is developing. I think it's very interesting. I think he's the embodiment of speak softly and carry a big stick, which is very cool. You rarely see that with villains these days. And I think that Vincent D'Onofrio's performance continues to be mysterious. Again, I'm not sure if it's just a series of well-chosen ticks or if there's real depth there, but I'm sure I'll find out soon enough. But he is keeping me interested, and I do like where the character is headed so far. The other thing I do like also the wariness that he has. He's like, I have to do what I have to do. The combination of wariness and cold, calculated confidence, which is interesting, because Kingpin is a character that is both confident and lacks total confidence at the same time, which makes him also a very interesting person to behold. But just like everybody enjoyed seeing a tired Daredevil in that hallway action sequence from episode 2, I do enjoy seeing a weary and tired Kingpin in the way he fights, which of course is moving pieces on a board. I also like the way he handled the media. I thought that was very clever to show that that's how he could get information out there, how he could put out misinformation. It was very much like, the old Hearst stories, William Randolph Hearst, and what Citizen Kane was trying to say, etc. I thought that was very, very interesting indeed, and I hope they explore that a little bit more. It's a pretty serious charge to levy at the media, but I think in some regard it might be a little bit warranted. So, like Wilson Fisk quite a bit, and I think it's interesting that the best villain so far to come out of the MCU, we'll see how Ultron fares, is from the small screen. All right, next up, Stick. I didn't like Stick. I'm just trying to bring my notes up here so I can see him a little better. Not a fan of Stick. I thought he was very obnoxious, and again, he was the most obvious writing device in in this show to date. In episode 7, he just screamed, writer's, magic genie. Like, whatever the writer needs to accomplish, they can just have Stick do it. I also thought it was so naive of Matt Murdock not to realize why Stick left him. I mean, it was so obvious and handled, like just a sledgehammer to us that you would think Matt Murdock would also understand it. I mean, Stick couldn't have been more clear that you shouldn't have anything, any ties, anything that can be leveraged against you or used to ransom you. And clearly he felt that Matt Murdock was becoming that to him. So, duh, obviously. But I think they both made it obvious, but then also didn't touch upon it enough. So that was frustrating. Also, it was so obvious that he was going to kill Black Sky. I mean, mistakes like that make Matt Murdock a little bit less likable because, he's our hero. We want him to not be. I mean, there's flawed and then there's just stupid. And then, let's see here. Also, I didn't quite understand how Stick could do what he could do. I mean, are they trying to say that everybody who loses their sight has heightened other senses? It's supposed to come from the chemical bath that Matt Murdock takes as a child. I don't quite understand how Stick is able to operate at the same level. I did like, though, that his eyes were scarred over, and it still bothers me that Matt Murdock's are not. He had chemicals in them that burned away his vision. I don't understand why his eyes would look perfectly normal. I guess they're like, we don't want to mess up Charlie Cox's face, but I'm like, Charlie Cox is sexy enough that he can handle that. Don't worry about that. All right, so that's Stick. Then next, Vladimir. I really liked Vladimir. I have to say, I thought he was the best teacher that Matt Murdock had in these 2 episodes. I thought he dropped a lot of truth bombs. I thought the actor did a really nice job. I was genuinely sorry to see his character go. Maybe he's not dead. Oh, I think that he is. Ah, darn it. Next, somebody else I'm sorry to see not totally go but be seriously sidelined is Rosario Dawson's Claire. I liked her so much the way she was introduced. I thought she had a really interesting lot of things that she brought to the table. But then she made like your typical girlfriend demand at the end of episode 5, and then now she's just been sidelined after it. So I feel kind of bad that that's the way things went for that character, and I hope she's brought in going forward. I hope she comes back. Next, Ben Urich. I love Ben Urich so much. Vondie Curtis-Hall is just so good here, and I checked to see if he was in the credits, the cast list for AKA Jessica Jones, the next series in this Defenders lineup on Netflix, and he's not. I guess maybe they didn't want to pay him, maybe Vondie Curtis-Hall is busy, but I think Ben Urich should be a constant throughout all these series as we lead up to Defenders, because it's all taking place in the same universe. Now maybe you could argue that, I think Jessica Jones is supposed to also be in the Hell's Kitchen area though, so I'm just frustrated that they don't have that. He really should be the Agent Coulson of the Defenders. And I would love to see that happen. And I miss Coulson in the Avengers films. He's been taken off and put on, ABC, which has been a death sentence practically for the character. But I think that Vondie Curtis-Hall could fill that role and do it quite well, and in a very different way, because he's not comedic. He's serious and really cool. Again, I got to see his wonderfully tailored clothing when he went to the crime scene. I was like, Ben Urich, you are one snappy dresser. And I thought the way he interacted with the police was very well handled. And I was actually really scared he was going to get shot by that sniper. I was like, oh, please, Ben Urich's so good. He's such a great guy. But I like that they put him in genuine danger. And I thought the way he handled it, the way he responded. I mean, that that detective was so mean to him. But, Ben Urich, hero that he is, tried to save his life. So I really like Vondie Curtis-Hall in this role. And he's becoming quickly, I think, one of the best characters on the show. So I love him very much. I just wish his storyline would move forward a little bit faster. Then next, finally, Karen and Foggy. Still don't like these characters that much. I do agree with you guys that Foggy's getting a little better, but it might be because Karen is getting so bad. I thought it was ridiculous that she was surprised to hear that Foggy liked her. I mean, he said you guys were on a date. How do you not understand this? He keeps asking you to go get drinks with him. I mean, it's like, I think that women sometimes do this. As a woman myself, I noticed this, and it's a horrible thing to do, where women will hide behind the, oh, I just thought we were friends, excuse. And no one's that obtuse. It's just an excuse and like a get out of jail free card that, guys, you shouldn't let women use it. It's not fair. And it's so obvious that it's ridiculous she doesn't understand it. And I think the writing, if they wanted to go that route, they could have been more subtle and they could have made it where she didn't understand. But in this case, it was just so obvious that there's no way she couldn't possibly understand it or have seen it coming. And then as for Foggy, the one thing that did surprise me, although I do also, one last thing for Karen, another thing that did make me like the character is that Foggy saved her life, or at least from serious harm. And all she could do was yell at him for following her. I thought that was not a way to make your character likable. And then as for Foggy, while I am warming to him a little bit, and the actor a little bit, I do still feel his role is very well written. I guess that's why I take offense to something I feel has become not well written, and that's that he would dislike Daredevil. I feel that just smacks of a comic book stereotype where they're like, the hero's best friend in disguise doesn't like the vigilante version of him, etc., etc. We see it many times, and I think that it doesn't fit with Foggy to date. Foggy is someone who decided not to take a job at a big law firm so that he could be a legal crusader, so to just take what's given to him at face value from the media, even though he knows that the Man in the Mask saved Karen, I just feel is, bad writing. Now again, he could be jealous of the Man in the Mask, and that's why he's doing this, but if that, because, Karen is like, that masked man saved me, and Foggy's like, stop talking about him. But I just feel that should have been made more clear then. So just not well handled for the first time where I've seen the Foggy character not handled well by the writing team. So that's my review of episodes 6 and 7. I'm very excited to continue. I'm loving this show, but I do feel it's just suffering a little bit from second act blues. So I'm curious what you guys think of it. Thank you for being patient. I'm going to keep watching the show. More reviews to come. I'm going to finish it, and I'm so looking forward to Jessica Jones. I even went and looked at some of the online photos because they're filming right now, and I think I'm very excited about it. And my expectations are raised quite high after this show, and I haven't even finished it. All right, thank you so much. Write your thoughts down below, and you can check out some other episodes right now.